But first, let's focus on PDG, which stands for Procedural Dependency Graphs. And it's all about extending the visual procedural paradigm to the big picture. All right, so before we go into exactly what it is and what it does, let me give you some background on that. So the motivation for it, it comes from two challenges that our industry, our users, are facing very frequently in your work. One of them is in VFX and film, and it has to do with ROPs. Anytime you try to do something with ROPs that goes beyond stringing together a couple of sims in a render, it quickly degenerates into an awkward scenario where you have very obtuse system of connections between the nodes, very hard to visualize, very hard to debug, very hard to extend. And that's simply because ROPs were not designed that way. And good luck trying to build a VFX pipeline on ROPs. That would be even harder. Okay? And then there's the efficiency problem. The fact that even if you're doing a sim and a render, which are very simple, very quickly you hit another roadblock with ROPs. Due to the way they cook, they make it very hard for you to get to that very important first pixel. And Scott will show you what that means in a few minutes. Now, the other inspiration comes from games. And just to pick two things, open worlds and photogrammetry. So the challenge with open world creation, procedural open worlds, is the fact that there's such a huge number of dependency to deal with. You have SOPs that help with geometric dependencies. You have Houdini Engine that does a really good job dealing with the individual asset and making local changes within the context. But there's still a missing overarching dependency system in Houdini and elsewhere as well. So if you want to build that, that's a lot of work. And then again, the efficiency question. How do you design a system? How finely grained do the dependencies have to be so that you know exactly what to update when something moves, like a road moves a bit, or a pond, or a building? Okay, something like that does not exist or does not come easily. Right now, you really have to work for it. So here's the theme, guys, right? There's something to do with dependencies and something to do with efficiencies, and that's what PDG tries to solve. So to understand how we came to the architecture for PDG, I need to do one more thing and explain to you the step we had to take mentally, the abstraction, basically, that we had to implement. And that's pretty straightforward. If you look up close, every context in Houdini, objects and ROPs and whatnot, do something pretty well, but it's very specific, right? And different than the other ones. But take just one step back, and suddenly you realize they're all about doing some tasks. So this is the abstraction. It's pretty straightforward. And you're just one abstraction away from finding that common denominator, that unifying language that lets you express everything in terms of one thing, tasks. Okay? And that extends to operations that have nothing to do with Houdini, yet operations that you encounter and you have to deal with every day in your work. So Houdini agnostic stuff. And the minute you bring those on, you're really talking about pipeline tasks. And just to play with a mental model a little bit more, imagine that we take away the Houdini component from that. Well, let's do that. Then the model still stands. And in fact, what we're dealing with is generic tasks or a generic pipeline. Okay, so let's go back now to everything displayed. And then what is PDG? Well, PDG is a system that handles all tasks and all dependencies and does so with very, very strong efficiencies built in. And since everything in Houdini is represented as a node, we went about doing that. So we introduced a new node context in Houdini called tops, top operators. And just to have fun, the icon that we picked for it is a top hat. That's why that's there, okay? And what tops are basically wrappers around PDG. PDG is an API, and tops are the nodes that you're very familiar with as Houdini users. So that means that together, PDG and top nodes represent a visual task management system with finely grained dependencies and very strong efficiencies built in. And that's quite the mouthful, okay? So depending on who you are and how you relate to PDG, it could simply be ROPS on steroids. ROPS 2.0, it could be just like that. It could be your fast sim and render, or it could be your generalized task management system, or it could be the heart and soul of your whole pipeline. It's that whole gamut. And all of that is available through nodes, which means that hardly any scripting is required. That was part of the thing, not to have to be a programmer to write all of this. You'll see that in a minute. So what we're introducing tonight is this tightly coupled technology between an API, PDG API, and the node system, which is fully available to you in Houdini 17.5. That's Houdini Core and Houdini Effects. And then custom tailored for pipeline and middleware in a new product that we're launching tonight called Pilot PDG. We'll give you all the details about Pilot PDG when we release the software, but for today, we'll just focus on the technology. So let's do that.